We were not meant to survive it. Not that year. The frost came early, curling beneath the doors before the leaves had even turned. By All Hallows' Eve, the wind already tasted of iron and silence. Our fields offered less than in years past. The turnips were small, the rye patch drowned in August rains and never rose again. Even the hens, as if warned by the sky, stopped laying before the nights grew long. But still we endured. We endured because that is what we were taught. Not by sermons, not by scrolls, but by smoke curling from the hearth, by straw pressed down beneath our backs, by the quiet squeeze of a hand in the dark. We endured not with swords or glory, but with ash, with rags, with heat shared between bodies and beasts. We learned to count the hours not by the sun, but by how many times we turned the fire, how long the embers could be coaxed to glow. Some nights we had no words, only breath, and the sound of the wind trying to get in. I'm sorry it's taken me so long to get this novella to you. Some of you have been waiting months, maybe a year, and I appreciate your patience. This is a story about winter, about loss, and also hope. It's one of my favorite stories I've written. But I was worried to put it out in the world because winters are hard, but so are springs. I guess this book is really about both. I wondered whether people wanted to read about the struggle to survive the cold or the aftermath of it. Either way, I'm glad it's finally here. First, I should explain why it took me so long to finish. The truth is, I procrastinated. I wrote the first draft of this story 4 years ago. I was trying to write something powerful, something that would make readers feel the cold, and I ended up making it bleak. I didn't know how to end it. I was scared to write the ending, so I just kept writing more and more bleakness. This is the first story I ever wrote that made me cry. When I reread it, the grief hits me right in the chest. And I know a lot of you out there feel grief sometimes in your chest or in your gut. Grief can be a physical thing, so I was scared to share something that felt so heavy. But last year, when the pandemic was at its height, when the future seemed uncertain and everyone felt alone, I thought maybe the story had to be told. What does it mean to endure? What does it mean to keep going? How do we balance the darkness in our lives with the possibility of hope? Those are questions I've always wrestled with, and this novella explores them. Now, I know some of you will read this story and find it depressing, and to those readers, I say this: life is complicated. It's messy and difficult. And this story doesn't shy away from the complications. It dives straight into them. But I believe in the power of facing difficult emotions head-on. I believe that art has the ability to help us process these emotions in a safe space. In a way, reading fiction is like going to therapy. It allows us to explore themes and emotions that we may not want to deal with in our own lives, but that need to be dealt with nonetheless. That being said, I also understand that we all cope differently, and some of you might feel triggered by certain parts of this story. If that happens, please take a break. Come back to it another day, or maybe listen to it as an audiobook. Reading is supposed to be a pleasure, and I don't want to cause any pain. If you're looking for a lighter read after this, I recommend checking out my collection of interconnected novellas called Things We Lost in the Fire. They're set in the same world as this novella, but they're full of magic, adventure, and romance. I hope you enjoy them. I'll see you in the next story. It didn't take everything all at once. Winter is patient like that. It waits. It chooses, and then it takes. It took old Nan first, gently under snow, that we could bear. She was old, and she'd always said she wanted to go when the fire was still warm. We gave her stones, a feather, a whispered hymn. But the cold doesn't always take the old. Sometimes it reaches elsewhere, slips into corners. It steals small things first, a laugh, a song, a memory, and leaves you wondering where you last saw it. By the second week of thaw, we realized what we had truly lost. The house had survived. Barely. But everything inside had changed. The table, where we once needed bread and shelled peas, was gone. It had been burned in pieces during the worst nights. The shelves that once held pots and jars were empty, stripped bare or broken for fuel. Even the walls bore scars, patched with mismatched boards, stuffed with rags, blackened by smoke. But it wasn't the house that haunted me. It was Eli. He didn't speak much after the winter. His voice returned, yes, but not the brightness in it. He'd sit in the doorway most days, legs drawn up, eyes watching the bare trees like he was waiting for something. When I offered him an apple, the first fresh thing we'd had in months. He took it slowly, as if unsure it was real. The silence stretched between us. Then he asked, "Do you think the birds are still full of winter?" I shook my head, even though I knew they were. But I didn't want him to know I'd seen the robins huddled together this morning, their breasts puffed out against the wind, their throats tight with cold. He looked away again, back to the trees, and I wondered if he could see the birds too. Winter had taken more than I realized that day. It had taken Eli's laughter, it had taken Tom's recklessness, and Ma's shoe-footedness. As for Pa, well, I wasn't sure what he'd been before the long night, but I knew who he was now. The cold had made him hard and sharp, like a tool you use until you feel the grit in your palm. But sometimes at night, when the fire was banked and the wind sighed through the cracks in the walls, I thought I saw a shadow flicker across his face. And then I wondered if maybe it was only me who was broken. I was the smallest, so it was my job to crawl under the eaves and retrieve the scraps of insulation that winter had blown out. One by one, I found them. A bit of wool here, a broken shutter there, a feather-light quilt. I carried them back to the fire one by one. They smelled faintly of snow and wood smoke and something else, something I couldn't name. And each time I laid another scrap on the flames, I felt a piece of me missing. What had I been before the long night? God. Had I been bright and quick like Eli, or strong and steady like Tom? I searched for myself in the dying embers, and all I found were ashes. The sun had started coming back now, but it wasn't the same. After the long night, it didn't climb high or linger long. And I soon realized we weren't the only ones waiting for it. And every morning I watched from the window as the other children came out from their houses, blinking against the weak light. We stood together at the edge of the village, shivering, silent. Then we spread out, searching. The first girl I ever saw was Lily. Her boots kicked up puffs of dust on the road. She wore a faded red coat, just like the one her father had worn. He hadn't been home since the snow fell, and I worried he wouldn't come back. My own PA didn't go out like that, not even to look for wood. He just stayed in the house with us. I called out to Lily, and she turned, surprised. She smiled then, a slow, hesitant thing. And for a moment, I felt like the world might be turning right side up again. We started looking together, and soon there were more of us. We found broken crockery, rusted tools, even a doll with yarn for hair, its porcelain face chipped but kind. Once I found a pair of children's shoes, tiny hand-stitched moccasins. I picked them up, turned them over in my hands. They smelled of dust and something sweet like berries. I sat down on a stone and put them beside me. And then, I wondered if I'd ever have new shoes again, shoes without memories stitched inside. On the day we found the books, the sky was the color of dried blood. The wind cut through the village like a knife and sent us scattering. I ran to the old schoolhouse and pushed open the door. The building had sagged during the winter, and a chunk of ceiling had fallen in, leaving a gaping hole. I climbed through the rubble and found myself inside a room filled with shadows. The books lay on a table in the corner, and I walked toward them, feeling a strange pull, like the world itself was reaching for something it had lost. They were storybooks, fairy tales, histories, even an arithmetic book. I pulled the first one off the shelf. Its pages were thin and brittle, and I opened it carefully. Inside, the pictures were bright and bold, telling stories of dragons and damsels and daring knights. For a moment, I forgot about the ruined house, the gnawing hunger, the endless search for fuel. I got lost in the pictures and the words, and it was like a forgotten part of me awakening, stirring, stretching. I read aloud, and the sound of my voice echoed in the empty room. And when I finished the story, I felt stronger, braver. I was still afraid, yes, but I also felt a spark of hope. When we found the seeds, Eli was with us. We were combing through the debris near the riverbank when he suddenly stopped, his eyes fixed on something in the mud. "Here," he said, and I knelt beside him. At first I couldn't see anything. Then I spotted a tiny green shoot pushing through the grime. Carefully, we brushed the dirt away, revealing a handful of seeds still clinging to their stalks. One by one, we examined them, turning them over in our hands, letting the mud trickle through our fingers. There were carrots, parsnips, even a few potatoes, shriveled but whole. "We can plant these," I said, and Eli nodded. At night, over a supper of boiled carrot, we talked for a long time. For the first time in weeks, we laughed, we joked, we told stories. and I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my belly, the one that told me we were just patching things up again, that nothing would truly grow here anymore. One afternoon, while we were gathering brush, I heard a shout from the direction of the river. I stopped and listened. Then I ran toward the sound, pushing aside the branches that had sprung up across the path. I found Lily kneeling by the water's edge, her face buried in her arms. I knelt beside her and asked what was wrong. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "My dolly," she whispered. "Her dress got torn, and I thought maybe the river would give her a new one." I understood then. So all those days we'd spent searching, collecting things that weren't ours to find, we'd become scavengers. And Lily was trying to make something whole again, just like me. I wanted to tell her that the river wouldn't give her dolly a new dress, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. Instead, I helped her gather smooth stones, and we skipped them across the water. And as I watched them dance and skip and fade into the current, I knew the long night had changed us, changed the world. And I wasn't sure if it was for the better or worse. These days, the nights were long again, but not because of the cold. Now the sun dipped low and lingered still, but the darkness came anyway. The forest waited, silent and deep. And every night I heard the wind sighing through the trees, whispering stories I couldn't understand. It was the language of the long night, and I feared it spoke of things to come. One evening last summer, the 5 of us were eating our supper in silence. It was one of those meals that tastes good after a long fast, but doesn't fill your belly quite right. It was then that I noticed a change in my little brother Eli. He was staring at his plate, eyes wide, lips moving as if tasting something else. "Eli, Ma," said softly, "what do you see?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pushed his bowl away and traced a line on the table with his finger. "There's a road," he whispered. "It goes from here to the barn, past the well and the sheds, through the old oak, and over the hill." He trailed off as if reaching the end of his journey. For a moment I thought maybe he was ill. Then Pa spoke. "He's been seeing things like that since spring," he said to Ma. "I thought it would have passed by now. Dreams, that's all it is, dreams and an empty belly." He reached for Eli's hand, but the boy pulled away. "Don't touch me," he snapped. "You don't understand." Pa recoiled as if struck. And then I did something reckless. I got up, walked past my father, and knelt beside Eli. What if he's right? Even though I knew I shouldn't speak so bold to Pa? What if Eli's seeing the road? What if we could walk it to the shops instead of riding? Or to the church? Or to the schoolhouse? I paused, gauging his reaction, and added, "We could take turns walking it so it wouldn't be so hard." For a moment I thought I'd lost my mind. Pa cleared his throat, but he didn't say a word. Ma squeezed Eli's shoulder, though. "Dreams can't fill an empty belly," she said gently, "but memories can wake you up to the ones that can." It was a riddle, but Eli understood. He nodded slowly and started packing a small bag. We didn't question him. We just watched as he filled the bag with a blue shawl, a crust of bread, a smooth stone, and a wildflower he picked from the window box. Later, when the sun dipped below the hill and shadows stretched across the yard, we found the 5 stones in a circle. Each of us placed a hand on the one beside us. Eli closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "Now I see the road," he said. "And now I see the road," echoed Pa. "And now I see the road," said Ma. "And though we couldn't walk it together, we walked it alone. And though we couldn't bring back what we lost, we brought back what we could." Summer came like someone knocking gently, not with trumpets or feasts, just sun on the floorboards. Breeze through the open window and silence that no longer felt dangerous. The hens began laying daily. The cow fattened. The herbs grew thick and bold. And for the first time in nearly a year, the sound of laughter returned to the village. Hesitant at first, like a child trying out its legs, then louder, steadier, shared. But inside us, the winter never quite left. Not in a haunting way, not like a ghost, more like an ember, buried but warm. In August, Ma made bread without thinking. It wasn't special bread, just flat rough, dusted with too much flour. But when she pulled it from the stone oven, Tom said aloud, "That smells like last year." "Before," Eli leaned in and whispered, "before we were fire." I asked him what he meant. He said, "We used to wait for warmth. Now we are the warmth." I looked at him, and I saw it was true. We no longer huddled like coals. We carried the fire with us. That week, Pa built a second bench for the table, not because we needed the space, but because, as he said, we might. Later that month, Ma sent me to gather elderflowers near the forest edge. I brought back more than she asked. Berries, mint, wild garlic, and a handful of bright red feathers I'd found stuck in a fence post. She looked at the feathers, then at me. We went past the stream. I did. You weren't scared? I was, but I wanted to go anyway. She smiled. That's how the bravest things start. The next evening, we lit a fire outside, for no reason. Not for warmth, not for food, just to sit around it. We carried out our stools. Eli brought a blanket. Tom carried a jug of water like it was wine. Pa said nothing but poked the flame as if greeting an old friend. Ma told us a story about Nan, the kind with too much magic and not enough sense. Eli added parts that Nan never said. Tom rolled his eyes but smiled. I watched the flames dance, and in them I saw not ghosts but layers. Of memory, of survival, of love folded in ash. I thought, we are not made of what we endured. We're made of what we kept burning through it. That night, before we went inside, Ma placed a stick on the fire and said very softly, for everyone who didn't, we all nodded because the fire remembers, and now so do we. August had always been our hardest month. The days stretched long and heavy. Heat shimmered off the dry fields, thick and cloying as fig and honey. Thorns scratched bare arms and legs. The corn rustled with barely concealed menace, and at night the fireflies blinked their hollow, cold eyes. Winter felt close, just beyond the trees, sharp and waiting. Yes. We spent those long months tucked inside, counting the hours till sundown. I'm this year, with the harvest gathered in and stored, the days still hot but less oppressive. With green things growing and buzzing and birds singing, it felt strange and good to be outside. One morning I woke before everyone else. Ma was up and moving about. When she heard me stirring, she came into my room. "Come see," she said. Outside, the field was white with frost. A fine layer of ice crystals sparkled on every blade of grass, every leaf. My breath caught in my throat. I wanted to run into the field, spin around till I fell, till I was nothing but breathless giggles and shivering delight. But I knew Ma would stop me, so instead, I let her lead me down the hill toward the river. There, nestled in the crook of two boulders, was a single red feather. My heart clenched. Oh, winter. Every time a raven landed on our fence, I rushed to the window. But the birds only ever came in pairs. Two black bodies, two harsh croaks. Never a flash of red against the gray sky, never a single. Then one day Eli had said, "The one will stay away till its kin is sure it can fly." And I waited, and now here was proof that they were coming back. One by one, raindrops began splattering into the river. Soon, it was raining so hard that I could feel the water through the soles of my feet, through the thin cotton of my shoes. Lightning cracked across the sky, rattled the windows. Thunder grumbled and rumbled, and I laughed. Not the frightened, cowering laugh I had when I was little, but a real laugh, deep and strong and true. The first one in a long time. I looked up and saw Ma smiling. Later, when the storm had passed and left the world washed clean, I found her by the river, cradling a branch that had fallen during the storm. It was smooth and oval like a giant egg. She looked up at me, her face shining, her hair plastered to her forehead with rain. "It's big enough for a cradle," she said, her voice hushed. I nodded. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. From the riverbank, the meadow looked like a patchwork quilt. All the wildflowers we'd planted last spring bursting into bloom. I ran among the colors, letting the petals brush my bare arms and neck, feeling the wind ruffle my hair. This summer, Eli declared, was going to be our best yet. He was wrong. It was going to be our first. We strung up lights in the branches of the old oak tree, twined flowers in our hair, roasted meat over an open fire, and danced till our feet were blistered and our laughter echoed in the valley. As the weeks went on, we swam in the lake, climbed to the top of the windmill, read stories by lantern light, chased fireflies in glass jars, and fell asleep under a sky full of stars. Sometimes at night, when the moon was full and the wind low, I would wake and hear the rasp of a crow. At first I thought it was a bad omen, something lost or stolen or dead. Then I realized that wasn't true. Not anymore. Ravens are smart, I told myself. They know a good thing when they see it. They know we won't hurt them. I would listen until the rasp became a croon, and the croon became a lullaby, and I slept. The first time I woke up late, I scrambled out of bed and raced to the window. The sky was clear and cloudless. The sun blazed down. Birds sang. The field rippled with heat. "Where is everyone?" I called. No answer. Puzzled, I got dressed and went to look for them. I found Tom by the river, kneeling beside the water and scooping up small fish. Eli sat on a boulder, sharpening a knife. Pa stood at the edge of the field, guiding the horses as they pulled up weeds. And Ma, her back to me, was braiding something long and dark. I stood there watching them, and I understood. I knew what each of them was doing because I knew why. After so many seasons of scarcity, we were taking back what was ours. We were preparing for winter, yes, but more than that. We were preparing for a year that would be kinder. I walked into the kitchen and reached for the bread knife hanging on the wall beside the door. And that's when I saw it. The feather, the one from this morning, caught in the crack of the window frame. It had been there all along, hidden in plain sight. A secret messenger. I carefully pulled it free and unfolded it. My fingers trembled as I traced the lines of crimson on ember. For a moment I couldn't breathe, but then the air flooded back into my lungs, and I knew, as surely as the North Star guides a ship, that we would be all right. We are not made of what we endured. We're made of what we kept burning through it.